In this clip, we'll do something a little bit different. We're going to determine the mean for grouped data. Now, what's group data? Well, you see it all the time on surveys where they ask questions like, what is your age? Is it between 10 and 15, 15 and 20, 20 and 25? Or what is your annual income? Between 20,000 and 30,000, or between 30,000 and 40,000, and so on. So that's group data. It's just been bunched into little intervals. So let's see how we find the mean for something like that. I'll show you an example on the left, and then stick around because on the right you get to try your own practice problem, and I'll post the answer. So let's go ahead and get started by reading our question. A sample of car owners was asked how old they were when they got their first car. The results were then reported in a frequency distribution. Calculate the mean. And here's the table they've come up with. So you can see that they've put the age into groups between 16 and 20, 21 and 25, and so on. So 10 people were between 16 and 20 when they bought their first car, for example. So let's see how we calculate the mean with step 1. The first thing we'll need to do is calculate the midpoints. That is the middle of each one of these intervals for the age group. So what's the middle between 16 and 20? Well, it's 18, but how do we show that with math? If you need to calculate the midpoint of two numbers, you just add them together like this, and then divide your answer by 2. And that'll give us 36 divided by 2, which is 18. So we're going to do that for each one of these intervals and come up with the midpoint. So for example, the next one will be 21 plus 25 divided by 2, which is 46 divided by 2, or 23. All right, so I've just gone ahead and listed the midpoint for each one of those intervals for the age right up there. And that's step 1. Now that we've found our midpoints, the next step is we need to multiply them with the frequency. So for example, the midpoint for this interval was 18, and it occurred 10 times. So we're going to multiply 18 times 10, which gives us 180. And let's repeat that calculation for the next interval. The midpoint was found to be 23, and it occurs 18 times, which gives us 414. Now, by all means, if you need to use your calculator for any of these calculations, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So let me just show you the results that I get for the remaining 3 intervals. The last 3 were 336, 264, and 76. So there we have it, all 5 intervals calculated. So multiply the midpoints by the frequency. Now let's move on to the last step. Finally, in this last step, we get to calculating the mean, but we do things a little bit differently because we're working with grouped data. We start off the same way. What we actually do is take the answers that we found in step 2 and just add them together, just like you would do for the normal mean calculations that we might have seen earlier. So I'm going to add them all up. But then normally what we would do is divide by the number of numbers on the top, in this case 5, but we're not going to do that. We have to divide by the number of people that were actually surveyed this time. And that's here. It's all of these numbers added together, because in this age bracket, 10 people were surveyed, and in this age bracket, 18 people were surveyed, for example. So we're going to add up those numbers. So try to remember that little tricky step at the bottom of this calculation. Now you probably want to go ahead and grab your calculator to find the answer to that, and that's fine. I'm just going to skip that and show you the final answer that you should arrive at. We should end up with a mean of 25.4. Now, what's our units here? Well, we're talking about the average age that somebody bought their first car. So let's say years. So what we've just done is taken a survey that had age grouped, and we found, well, the average age that somebody bought their first car was 25.4 years. So let's just quickly review the steps. In step 1, we found the midpoint of each one of the age intervals. Then in step 2, we just multiplied those answers by the frequency to arrive at these numbers here. And in step 3, we added those numbers together and then divided them by the total number of people surveyed to arrive at 25.4 years. Let's have a look at a similar problem that you can try on your own, and I'll post the solution when you're ready to look at it. A survey of athletes asked how many hours they train per week. The results were then reported in a frequency distribution. Calculate the mean, and you've been given a table that looks like that, where we have our intervals and our frequency. So try that one out using the steps that I showed you on the left, and I'll post the solution when you're ready. Well, if everything went smoothly for you, you should have found the results of this survey. On average, athletes train 5.4 hours in a week. And we found that by first calculating our midpoints in step 1. Then we multiplied the midpoints by their frequencies in step 2. Then we used the answers from step 2 for the top of the equation, and we divided it by the total number of athletes that were surveyed. And we found 5.4 hours was the mean.